Welcome to Reconciliation.
Hello and welcome to Reconciliation with Casio Shyn, former attorney, U.S. Marine, and classical civilizations major. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're going to get to know Casio, a little bit about his background and what has shaped his view of the world. Casio, great to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Kevin. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Like you said, I am a classical civilizations major, and um, I just learned about history and the significance of the Renaissance and democracy and our modern way of life. Being a classical civilizations major, as a U.S. Marine, I was heavily into military history. So, war never ends. That's the lesson. Every 3 to 5 years, there's always a conflict, and it is a struggle between good and evil. And as an attorney, I learned to argue and to listen to both sides and understand that arguments are complex. And sometimes the best answer is I don't know or maybe.
Yeah, I mean that's quite the resume. Attorney, U.S. Marine, classical civilizations major. How did all this come together? Like it seems almost like there's a lot of different stops in your life.
Yeah, I went to UCLA, graduated in 2001, and I was with a degree in classical civilizations. I was associating with Vietnam veterans, and these guys knew their history. They risked their lives for an idea, and they were very educated. They were very well read, and they understood the significance of what they were doing in Vietnam. So that was the start. So there actually was a lot of conversations about history with these veterans, and um, they Vietnam was a struggle against communism, so they were very anti-communist, and that conflict has been what has defined the latter half of the 20th century.
How do you feel your background has sort of shaped your view of current events?
Yeah, the three questions that I ask uh, to see if people have a basic understanding of history. Um, t- and I've asked a lot of people these questions, Kevin. They get it wrong a lot of times. But the first question that I ask is, um, who invented the printing press? Right? When? Do you happen to know the answer?
Oh man, I'm thinking back to my school age days. My mind went to Eli Whitney, but that was the cotton gin. Um, no, I don't think I remember.
Yeah. Another way of asking that question is, um, what is the world's first mass printed book?
Is it not the Bible?
It is the Bible.
Okay.
And um, so I think people don't understand how significant that event is. Um, so um, the second question that I ask is,
Wait, you didn't answer the first one yet. Who invented the printing press?
I have a basic understanding of history. Okay, this is I'm not an expert. It's been a very long time since I visited these issues, so it's just a basic understanding of this is how a classical civilizations major sees the world. Okay, and it was Gutenberg. Um, there are other answers floating around in the internet, but the printing press that really changed the world, was 1400s Europe, Gutenberg.
Okay, so question two.
Yeah. The second question is, who invented public education and when and where?
That I would public education. I'm thinking back to to Roman times. Would that be right?
Um, the Romans had tutors. They studied Greek, but the public education that is paid for by the state from taxpayer money, that is Horace Mann, 1800s, here in the United States.
Oh wow. Okay, I wouldn't have
So
expected that.
yeah, so we have to remember this was the Industrial Revolution, and uh, they realized that kids, people needed to have new skills. They needed to learn math, science in order to advance and be part of the Industrial Revolution,
Hmm. Okay.
right? And yeah, so the third question is who invented? So we have ancient democracy in ancient Greece. Okay, this was 800 years before Christ to 500 years in the Common Era, classical antiquity, and then we have modern democracy, right? So, what country is the world's first modern democracy? That's the question.
Country that had the world's first modern democracy. How about France?
But it's the United States of America.
Oh, it is. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and so these questions are you used to ask a lot of people these questions. Um, but the lesson here is you, you had you had the Renaissance, right? And it's called the rebirth of civilization. And you had classical antiquity. You have this about 1,000-year period of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, right? And you have these two periods where democracy flourished. Um, and in the middle is just um, a void. It's a gap. There was very little in terms of achievements, scientific, etc. Life was pretty much the same throughout this entire time period. So um, before democracy, modern democracy, for thousands of years, for basically like 99.9% of human history, you had nothing but absolute rule, monarchies, feudalism. Okay. Um, you had totalitarianism, and um, then you have these two beef periods of democracies. Okay. And you can see how special these periods are just by looking at the art, right? Realism, the ability to create statues that are lifelike, occurred in antiquity and during the Renaissance. In between, if you look at medieval art, they look like stick figures. The
Hmm.
people look retarded. And but so think about democracy and art, and there is a connection. And um, the the other connection is in architecture. They said something like there were no building projects in Rome after Marcus Aurelius for like 1,000 years. Okay, so it just shows you this void, this gap, this decline in civilization. You also see this in the antikythera mechanism, where this thing was invented 200 years before Christ, and you can't get anything similar until 1400s, until the modern era. So what happened in between that just created this decline in civilization? And why is it that art, realism, coincides with eras of democracy? So, um, if you look on the internet, there's a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of controversy, and I think that's another topic and theme that I want to explore. But misinformation and controversy, um, you have to sometimes just dig deeper. Okay, so with the world's first modern democracy, you have answers all over the place. You have people saying, if I read my notes, the Isle of Man. You have India, ancient India. You have New Zealand. They're saying they're the world's first modern democracy. Well, so I'm not a political science major, and political science majors would, they would bite my head off saying we're not a democracy, a true democracy, we're a democratic republic, or some very specially defined term. But to a classical civilizations major, we're just using the big D here. Um, the, what's what's different about so I'm sure it can get very academic, okay? But what's different about American democracy is that we ended the concept of nobility,
Hmm.
right? So all these other places, they may have had some sort of democratic form of government where they voted and that vote became law. But if there was a king or a queen or feudalism behind these governments, then is it really a democracy? You know, so yeah, so we got rid of the idea of a permanent ruling class based on birth, right? So there's so before modern democracy, for the majority of history, you just had nothing but um, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, tyranny. And then you have democracy, which and our democracy ended this idea of kings, queens, nobility. And that was very special. And if you look at it one way, if you live in a system where someone by birth has wealth and privilege, and you're in this caste system, where there are differences in appearance and the way you speak and education level and all these other things that prevent you from rising up, that is slavery, in my opinion. That is the old way is slavery, and there's a connection between democracy, individual rights, and the end of slavery, and that is something that we forget. We forget that connection. Um, Sometimes people say that America is a racist country or there's institutional racism. And I'm sure there are fair arguments. And but I think we forget the historical perspective here, which is that for the majority of history, we had to we had no choice. Human beings, the majority, had to farm and work on the land, and someone else was able to just take our profits, our crops, etc. And that is not a very, um, from modern standards, a very good way of life, right? So, so you have this connection between art, architecture, science. They said that Archimedes knew so much about math that if you took all of the mathematicians in the 15th century and combined them, Archimedes would still be the expert, right? So, to classical civilizations major, the Renaissance is a very special and important time period where they read books in Latin and Greek, and they studied um, classical antiquity of 1,000, 2,000 years before. And they read books on math, logic, and science. And that was because of the printing press, because of books. Um, yeah, and um, I think it's more than the printing press. I think it's actually the spread of churches to local communities would require um, architecture and art to revive. But you have this study of logic and reason of science of the ancient texts, which led to the scientific method and the scientific revolution, right? You have an idea and you test it. And from the scientific revolution, you have the industrial age. So many wonderful things that define the modern era um, can all be traced to how um, books spread across Europe, and scientific treatises and organizations also spread and grew. But there's a direct connection between um, learning and profound change, right? We're talking about profound change in terms of science, political, economic, all in a short period of time, all in a central place. And you have the United States of America. You have this um, idea that it's there's human beings. It was the end of slavery in many ways. Okay, and with individual rights, you have the suffrage movement, you have the abolitionist movement, you have anti-discrimination laws, which were historical. Breaking cases of everything from interracial marriage to age discrimination to discrimination, monumental, groundbreaking cases before the Supreme Court. So we are a country that was founded on slavery, but at the same time, you have this other historical context that we forget. And I would say that institutional racism doesn't exist in America, but generational poverty does. And in many ways, they're the same thing.
Yeah, I think they're connected pretty dramatically, especially in urban environments. You see that the most.
Right. So I hope I explained how classical civilizations major see the founding of the United States, and George Floyd and all of the protests and all of the looting. It was a horrible time for me to witness. And yeah, it we forget our lessons in history. And I'm using my background to sort of explain where we are right now as a country. But yeah, there's just a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of controversy.
No doubt about that. And we're out of time for today, but I'm excited to continue to unpack this idea with you, your unique view of the world and of the country. That's it for today's episode of Reconciliation with Casio Shyn. Casio, thank you so much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Kevin. This was a great first show. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.